I'm Dana Perino, and this is Perino on Politics. Well, it's the final night. Vice President Kamala Harris will take the stage to formally accept her party's nomination for president. The vice president expected to reintroduce herself to the country and rally her base, but whether or not she'll introduce any policies or plans, that remains to be seen and unlikely. Welcome to Perino on Politics, where I call my smart friends and find out what's on their minds about the state of American politics. So we are here at the United Center in Chicago, Illinois, and we are on the final night of the DNC. Joining me back on the podcast today for a glimpse of what we can expect from the final night is Josh Kraushaar. Of course, he's at Jewish Insider. You can definitely sign up for that email every morning. It's excellent. And he's a Fox News radio political analyst. Whew! That's a lot. Okay, this is a pop-up podcast.
I love it here in Chicago.
Because I usually only do these on Mondays, but sometimes there's a special occasion.
What's going on here?
Also, we can't leave because the security is so tight, so we have to fill our time. But I thought this would be a good time, Josh, for you and I to have a check-in, because on Monday we kick it off. Joe Biden gives a speech and he leaves, and there's like a collective sigh of relief at the Democratic National Convention. It's not that they don't respect him, and that I do think there is a lot of affection for him, but wow, were people ready for him to go.
Dana, can you imagine if Joe Biden was still the nominee?
If he gave that speech tonight, the hall would be half empty.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that his speech was the least well-received. I mean, yes, there was a lot of honor for President Biden. It was quite a send-off. But, boy, that speech went too long. It was more about him than it was about his
It was horrible.
vice president.
It was basically the State of the Union speech he gave last year with a sprinkling of Kamala Harris every once in a while. And I feel like the staff at the White House or the campaign said, it's his last speech. Let him say whatever he wants. And don't try to, he loves that line, leave the line in, et cetera, et cetera. And it became a kitchen sink speech, which George W. Bush used to call it. That's like where everybody tries to put something in the sink.
Well, you know, I thought what was interesting about the speech, too, is that he tried to tie Kamala with all of his policies.
Oh.
His policies are not all that... I think Kamala Harris is trying to run away a little bit from
there was one point he was talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, which caused inflation. And he said, and Kamala Harris, my vice president, she was the tie-breaking vote. And he's expecting applause. So there was applause, except Kamala Harris sat on her hands. She was like, I'm not going to applaud for that, because she knows.
That's fine. I didn't see that.
Yeah.
But that is so telling, because I think Kamala Harris is trying... One of the kind of brilliant elements of this convention is she's trying to etch a sketch away her own record in the administration and trying to create something new. She's the incumbent in this race, essentially, but she's trying to run as the outsider, as the change candidate. And, Biden was the one speaker who undermined that message, kind of stepped on that strategy.
And so has it worked?
Look, the one thing that I never would have predicted a month ago is that the Democratic Convention would have this much energy. I mean, that the base is back with the party. Joe Biden had lost the base, young voters, African-American voters. They were totally checked out. I don't know what this would have looked like if it was Joe Biden accepting the nomination Thursday night. The big question to me is, like, where's the substance? Where's the beef, right? That was we've heard a lot of good vibes. We've heard a lot of, the tone has been moderate, but the substance has been
Well, you had Senator Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Democrats, say they are intentionally vague, and they plan to keep it that way for as long as possible. And because she's not talking to the media, and the media is not hammering her in any way. So, I guess as a strategy, it could work.
The question is, can you avoid the media for 85 days?
I think everything gets harder for Kamala Harris starting tomorrow.
You would think that the normal rules of politics are that the convention's over, right? And then the tough pieces of the papers emerge, the attacks begin, Labor Day, sort of the unofficial start of campaigning. But then I think about early voting, like a lot of states, including Pennsylvania.
North Carolina starts early voting on Friday, September 6th. That's 4 days before the first debate.
There's something wrong about an election when you have early voting before the first debate. It doesn't seem like very democratic.
The other thing is that she was able to do, and we've touched on this a little bit, but I just want to talk about the enthusiasm gap. So Donald Trump's voters are very enthusiastic, those who plan to vote for him. And when we left the RNC a month ago in Milwaukee, I think you and I did a podcast, and we were like, wow, this party is united, and they are going to crush it. Biden is toast. And then here we are a month later, about 5 weeks later, and the enthusiasm gap has been erased. So is the enthusiasm tied now?
Well, Donald Trump has not lost the enthusiasm from the Republican Party. He still, if you look at the polls, still gets the base behind him. The mistake, I think, looking back at the Republican convention was that Trump didn't think he really needed to build on that base energy. J.D. Vance, he brings a lot of things to the table, but J.D. Vance is not the type of running mate who's going to reach out to the suburban independent trying to make up your mind voters in those swing states. So he played to the base. I think the energy is there for the Republicans, but now Democrats changed their nominee, and they got their base back, and they have been very careful to try to strategically put out speakers that represent sort of the more pragmatic side of the party. I don't think it's very convincing, frankly. Like, there's not a lot of policy being discussed. Kamala Harris, her one actual policy she proposed involved price controls and all this anti-gouging, price gouging play, but it doesn't sound very moderate to me. And there's not a lot of details on what they're talking about, but tonally they are trying to win over those people who are still figuring things out and may want to vote Democratic but could vote for Joe Biden.
The other thing that's been fascinating here as we sit at the DNC United Center in Chicago is that all of the speakers tried to basically pretend that the Biden-Harris administration had never happened, and you're supposed to believe that Donald Trump is the incumbent. And I'm thinking, wait a second, I'll give you an example. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on Monday night was giving a speech, very fiery, very like, wow, she's a good speaker, I got it. But she said, if you are a retiree who had to come out of retirement and get a job again because gas prices and grocery prices are so high and you can't afford to make ends meet, then Kamala Harris is for you. And I thought, excuse me, ma'am? The reason the gas prices and the grocery prices are higher is because inflation was so high, and inflation happened under the Biden-Harris administration. And then we went on and on. Barack Obama on Tuesday night, right? Amazing speech. And he said, can we afford another 4 years of the bumbling and the stumbling of this administration? And I thought, wait, no. You're talking about the Biden-Harris administration. Even
Michelle Obama had a line where she was like, aren't you glad that there's change coming, that there's like a new... That's a rebuke.
Can they get away with this? Well, I guess they'll try.
They're trying to. It's been a very audacious convention. We've heard a lot about freedom, even though you could rightly point out that a lot of the policies that Harris embraced about regulating people's economic lives, about COVID policy in Minnesota, where the Governor Walz was one of the most restrictive states in terms of reopening and prosecuting people who tried to open their businesses in the aftermath of COVID. I wouldn't call this ticket the ticket of freedom, yet they're trying to co-opt that message. Weird. I mean, you can certainly point to a lot of weird stuff going on in the Democratic Party, but they're trying to attack Trump and Vance with that message. There's a lot of political jiu-jitsu going on, and it's up to Trump and Vance to rebut those attacks.
Yeah, because the media's not going to help them.
Not at all.
At least not for now. We'll see. Because Kamala Harris always starts off very well out of the gate, but crashes and burns in her campaigns.
Yeah, and look, she has a record.
I shouldn't say always, but
she doesn't have
in
a
the
whole
presidential one.
She did in 2020, like she didn't get to Iowa and underperformed badly despite having that strong.
Spent
kickoff.
all the money.
Didn't have a message. And the thing about Harris is, on policy, at every opportunity, she sort of pivoted to the left, even though the smart play politically would have been to be like Joe Biden and run a little more to the middle in that campaign. As vice president, Dana, she's been something of a surrogate to the progressives. She hasn't given any speeches. She hasn't done anything. Forget about policy, just trying to make outreach politically to more moderate parts of the party. She's been much more comfortable with the left. So, we'll see tonight. I don't think she's going to really give moderates a whole lot of reassurance.
One thing you'll see in the hall tonight, the final night of the DNC, when Kamala Harris is going to speak here in Chicago at the United Center, I would say the house that Jordan and Pippen built. How do you like that little knowledge?
I try to get as many sports metaphors being at the United Center, but we saw Steve Kerr, who was
of course,
also part of that.
And a Democrat.
Chicago Bulls teams.
But you're going to see a lot of women wearing white tonight because the only issue they have talked about in depth is abortion and women's rights and the civil right and the right to choose. When they talk about freedom, that's what they mean. The other thing is they keep trying to ascribe policies to Donald Trump that he doesn't believe in. For example, they said he's going to do a federal ban on abortion. Like, actually, no. Maybe he's not talking about that issue at all, except for to say just leave it to the states, which also might not help him. But he's definitely not for that.
No, and they're trying to sort of misrepresent. I mean, there's a reason Trump has sort of been very adamant about not supporting a federal ban of any sort on abortion and keeping it to the states. But look, it's a part of the Democratic Party's political play to really energize women and get a big gender gap on behalf of just the divide between the two genders. I was looking at Nate Cohn wrote an interesting write-up in the New York Times this week about all their polling in all the battleground states. The group that actually moved the most since Kamala Harris came to the top of the ticket were young women on abortion. That was the big issue for them.
Can that make a big difference for him then?
I mean, Trump either...
Meaning, yes, if he had advantages in battleground states, but are those advantages being erased by young women getting behind Harris?
Well, for Trump, certainly how he talks about issues not being on the attack constantly. I mean, the tone matters a lot, I think. Sometimes you can have the same position, but how you say something and how you frame something makes a big political impact. And I think Trump could be well attuned to how he sends his message.
He was at the border today. They did an hour last night at the DNC here about how great Kamala's been on the border and how tough she's been. Not a lot of people were listening. They were excited, for the John Legend performance, which was great, I have to say. But what do you think about that counter-programming by Trump?
Well, it's smart. And then you heard about Trump was talking about crime and foreign policy this week. It's hard to get attention when you have the other party's convention at the same time.
But maybe in that local media he was able to break through.
Yeah, and those states are so
important. They also did something funny at the Trump campaign because there's no meat on the bones, as you said, for Kamala's policies. The Trump campaign made a website for her with all the policy positions that she's had in the past. And they're not lies. You know what I mean? Like when they say that he wants a federal ban on abortion and he doesn't, that's a lie. And that's really unfortunate. Let's argue it on the merits. The American people deserve that. But I did think it was clever to come up with the website.
Well, look, and the stuff on that website, Kamala Harris's embrace of the Green New Deal, embrace of her role as border czar in this administration. I think the issue of crime is a big one, where both Harris and Walz was governor of Minnesota when the riots in Minneapolis happened.
Speaking of that, did you see the former mayor of Minneapolis do an interview about Governor Tim Walz and how he was not as helpful as he could have been during that, and that he waited 2 days to call in the National Guard to help Jacob Fry?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was in 2021. Now he's changing his tune because it's not politically convenient to say that reality. But the mayor of Minneapolis said Tim Walz was a total mess in responding and protecting the city of Minneapolis. And people lost their businesses. People were killed. People were injured. I mean, that is a big line of attack that ties also Harris into the equation, because she was indulgent of a lot of these defund the police ideas that were very popular for the left-wing base in 2020. So there's a lot of vulnerabilities. That website really hit them all. But the crime issue is one that both Walz and Harris have some glaring vulnerabilities.
All right, well, let's take a quick break. And we are back with Perino on politics. Josh, let's talk about Governor Tim Walz a little bit. He gave a great speech. He will be a good wingman for Kamala Harris. He knows how to attack. But there are some things that are just weird, to use his word. But let me ask you one of them. So Kamala Harris had options for who she would choose, and I do think it came down to Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, who gave an amazing speech yesterday. Jewish American out of Pennsylvania, extremely popular governor and a competent governor, and can appeal to independents. Tim Walz, pretty kind of unpopular governor, and also he tries to say that he's like this folksy guy that has all of this support from red-leaning rural America, but when you look at the numbers, that's not true.
No, I mean, this was a pick of style over substance, and maybe style wins out for 3 months, but...
Or maybe chemistry, like maybe her personal connection?
She loved the idea of having this guy from rural Minnesota.
Older white guy.
Who was a football coach and a high school teacher, even though he was really liberal. I mean, he's really liberal. I mean, that his record, in the House, he was a little more moderate, but then once he had a chance to take power and as governor of the state, to be himself, very, very left wing. You can go over all the policies. But the question is, do we look at Tim Walz's record? Do we look at his record? Is Trump going to hit the Harris-Walz ticket on crime, on immigration, on all the issues where they may be vulnerable, or do vibes matter more? I always thought policy did play a big role in politics, even though vibes always matter too. But this is an election so far where the vibes have mattered a lot more than the substance.
Can you talk to me about your other, put your other hat on for a moment, Jewish Insider Editor-in-Chief? What other titles do you have there? Probably all that.
That's the big
Editor-in-Chief. And there have been protests here in Chicago. They have not been as big as feared. You did have the parents of one of the hostages give a very moving speech and get a standing ovation last night. But there's not been one mention of the word Israel.
Yeah, in fact, I think the hostage family, the Goldberg-Polans, were the first speaker to actually mention Israel
on the third night
on the convention floor. Mm-hmm. It took that long and took that much time. Look, the Democrat. One thing that we've heard a lot from sources here at the Democratic Convention is, why is the Democratic Party so scared of this fringe, this radical fringe that is anti-Israel, that is trying to disrupt their own convention, and they have, a few dozen delegates, and yet they don't mention the word Israel. They don't, they've been very wary about alienating the far left. And a lot of Democrats think that is just politically self-defeating, that there's a moderate majority. You heard the reaction in the hall after hearing the Goldberg-Polan family talk about how Hamas kidnapped and injured their son and have been holding him hostage for over 300 days. People were in tears on the floor, and yet we didn't hear a very outspoken condemnation of. We didn't hear Hamas mentioned either. We heard a lot about Gaza. In fact, even Joe Biden used the word Gaza a few times in his speech, but didn't condemn. You didn't hear any other speaker condemn Hamas and terrorism.
Biden brought up a hoax about Donald Trump and Charlottesville, saying I ran in Charlottesville because Donald Trump said there were very fine people on both sides. It has been debunked up one side and down the other. If you look at the full context of what he said, that's not what he said. But then Biden went on to say that the protesters who are outside, that they have a point. Basically, he was saying there's fine people on both sides. And he never talked about Hamas and the terrorists and what had happened, or about the women who were raped, the children who were killed, or whose parents were killed in front of them. What did you think of that? And also, I will say this. It was not written into the speech. It was an ad lib, because my colleague, Bill Hemmer, he follows along on the teleprompter, and he said that was an ad lib line by Joe Biden.
It makes you wonder why the Democratic Party, why Joe Biden can't condemn terrorism, can't condemn Iran. And it's been unusual, the absence of foreign policy generally in the remark. Biden did talk about Ukraine a little bit, but it should be pretty easy to condemn Hamas terrorism, and yet it took the hostage families to actually say that directly. I talked to Josh Shapiro the day after the Biden speech and asked him if he agreed with President Biden that the protests had a point, and he avoided the question.
Well, that's what I thought was sad, though. So he avoided the question rather than just being able to answer it.
It should be easy, and the fact that it's so hard for even pro-Israel Democrats like Josh Shapiro tells you about they are worried about keeping the left-wing rabble-rousers, the far left of the party, the squad, in the tent. They don't want them on the outside. They want them on the inside, not causing trouble.
My last question in this segment, before we go to a lot of questions that we got from my X account today. Down ballot situation for, let's just quickly do, just overall, you don't have to go through the states, but overall feelings about Republicans and Democrats and their positions, and down ballot, by that we mean Senate races and House races. Yeah,
so I was talking to a top Republican Senate official this week. They feel really good about West Virginia. They're feeling a lot better about Montana. That's John Tester against Tim Sheehy. The Republican is Sheehy, who's run a really good campaign. Ohio is a toss-up type race.
So, if in Ohio, if Donald Trump wins by 10, that means the Republican has a better chance.
Yeah, they need Trump's coattails in Ohio. Bernie Moreno is the Republican running there. He's a businessman from Northeast Ohio. He's going to run behind Trump in all likelihood, so they're going to need Trump to run up the score in Ohio. That said, if Republicans win West Virginia and they win Montana, they'll have it'll be it'll be whoever is the new Senate Republican leader holding the majority.
Yeah, Thune or Cornyn. Senator Thune. Sorry, I usually don't do this on this podcast because I try not to get too granular, but Senator Thune is a senator from South Dakota, been there for quite a few cycles, and has put his hat in the ring. And the other member of the Senate running is Senator John Cornyn of Texas.
and former member of leadership who's very well respected. Both of them
They actually get along great and everything. So
yeah, very, very well liked, well respected senators. I think the one thing that there's a little more worry about, especially since Biden got replaced with Kamala Harris on the ticket, some of those purple states like Nevada, Pennsylvania, Arizona, those are looking a little harder if you look at some of the recent polling and some of the vibes, to borrow the phrase of the convention.
I know, it's going to be a banned phrase. On Gutfeld on the 5 used to have banned phrases for one more thing, and that's going to be one of them. All right, we will take a quick break and be right back. And welcome back to Perino on Politics. Josh, I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and they're pretty quick. The last one is the one I usually always ask, but the first one here from somebody who follows me. What is Josh's biggest takeaway moment from the DNC 2024?
So 2 things. I was sort of struck by how political Oprah was. Oprah being a surprise,
and the first time Oprah ever came to a convention to speak.
Yeah, I actually forgot that she didn't speak at the Obama convention.
Nope. She endorsed him, but
Obama,
she never. And she came here. And she came here as an independent, and that's how she spoke.
She sort of. I mean, she spent her political. She.
Yeah, she's done. She's like, I am going to cash in now. Yeah. Here's all my chips.
Yeah, I was surprised because she's always been very, very protective over that independent identity. Look, Michelle Obama, I thought.
Oh my gosh, that was a speech
of the convention. Yeah, I mean, I thought that, and she was also like, her famous line when they go low, we go high. She went low. She
certainly
low
did. You know what I would have done? I would have flipped those speeches. I would have had President Obama go first and say, we're doing things a little differently around here now, and introduce his wife, because she was better than he was.
I think so. Obama seemed to rehash his own convention
speech.
Oh
my gosh. I was like, please. It's like all the speeches have been 20 minutes too long, except for Governor Tim Walz, and I thank him for that. Another question is, who do you think the winner of the DNC is?
Oh, boy, that's a good question.
It is. You could look at that. They have a pretty deep bench for the future.
Yeah. Look, Wes Moore is a guy to watch, governor of Maryland. He gave...
Great speech.
It wasn't the keynote address, but it was like the keynote address.
Yeah, it was great.
Sort of a very unified
I think the winner's Kamala Harris.
We'll see.
In 28 days or 32 days, she has a party that is united behind her. And I will tell you, I haven't felt enthusiasm from Democrats like this since 2008.
Yeah, this is energized convention.
It's different. It feels different.
Yeah, very much so. And she has a lot on the line tonight.
Well, this leads to this next question. How would you compare the energy of the RNC versus the DNC?
Both conventions very energized. There are more celebrities. I mean, Hulk Hogan was the highlight. Right?
Yeah, Kid Rock.
Kid Rock, of course. But, the Democrats always have more Hollywood celebrities. Oprah was a surprise. We had, what was it, the Spike Lee, when they had that roll call. Pink
is going to sing, and then there's a rumor that Beyonce is here.
Yeah.
I have one young woman who works for me, and she is waiting for this moment. And then as we were walking over to come here to do this, there was a woman behind us saying, and these idiots think that Beyonce is going to be on stage tonight. She's not. And my little assistant, her face fell. I don't know. But I think Beyonce could show up.
My daughter was...
Because you know what? She has a song called Freedom.
Well, I've heard that somewhere in a campaign ad. Okay,
here is my final question. We are about to leave the second convention of the summer and of the cycle. We have a week before Labor Day, and then another week after that before the first debate. What are you paying attention to that I should watch?
Well, it's funny because the week before Biden had the debate and Trump was about to be sentenced and all those things that were on the calendar, I thought that was going to be one of the most important months in politics, and who knew that it was even more crazy than we imagined. We're about to head into another stretch where, the conventions are over. Harris is now the nominee. She's got all that sugar high from the hype. She's going to have to debate, and the attacks are going to come, and how she handles the attacks, how she responds, how she does interviews. I assume she's going to be doing some interviews.
Yeah, she said she's going to do one on August 31st. I imagine it will be like Lindsay Davis of ABC. I would imagine.
Hope she comes on Fox.
I would love to interview her. I would love to have an opportunity. And I appreciate, Michael Tyler, the head of the campaign. He came on our show. So did Keisha Lance Bottoms, who used to be the mayor of Atlanta. She came on. I'm looking at a couple of things. For anybody who is on the Republican side and felt so good coming out of Milwaukee, and then on that Sunday afternoon, Biden drops out, and so much changed in 32 days. So here we are. Don't think it can't change again.
Yep.
in another 32 days. And there are foreign policy issues that are happening. We still have Joe Biden as the president. He says he's going to be the number one volunteer for the campaign, and I have a feeling you'll never see him. This is still a close race. Both parties have floors of, like 45%. Things happen. All you need to move, a point or two in one direction, and all that can change. So here's the thing, is that sometimes when you read a book, you want to flip to the end and find out what's going to happen. I am enjoying just being in the middle of the story right now. I love being here. I think that Fox News has done an incredible job in covering the election so far, but certainly both conventions. It's a lot of work for a lot of people who work behind the scenes that don't get a lot of credit, and they get very little sleep. And I just want to thank everybody for listening, being a part of it, and thank you for being a part of all the shows. It's been a tremendous week, and boy, it's been 8 years, right? It's an actual in-person convention, so it's great to be here together. All right. Thank you, Josh. Thanks, everybody, and we'll be back on Monday with another Perino on Politics. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.